Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the penultimate panel of the day. Second day of Fashion Sustain.Conference. Second, like one of the, I would say, the two best days of Fashion Sustain and Neonyt that we ever had. I'm glad that you all still be here and still listen to some really interesting and deep diving topics that we could focus on during those last 2 days. So, well, in this second to last panel, we will have a focus on a topic that drives us within Neonyt for a couple of seasons now, and it comes up every now and then, and it gets more interesting and more interesting while the deeper we dived in it and the deeper we looked in it. And obviously, Neonyt and Green Showroom before that came from being a fashion-focused trade show. And you see it up here on the screen already. The panel is called Performance Meets Fashion and Sustainability. You could put a question mark behind that as well if you want to, because we think that performance meets fashion really, really, really hard in the last seasons, or in the last couple of seasons. And well, while it hit our trade show grounds ever more in the last seasons, we haven't had it like really that deep on the topic list yet. We had it every now and then, but never was a group of people so deep in that topic as we do have today. Kutay Saritosun, good to have you up here. You're coming from Bluesign.
Thank you, yes.
You're a material expert within Bluesign, and you can help us out a little bit explaining and understanding how production processes could be streamlined in a more sustainable way, hopefully, and how this performance fashion topic is interesting from your perspective. Then we have Tomas Vucurevic, I always pronounce it wrong. You're the ingredient brand guru coming from your own branding agency called Brained. You did branding for companies like Econil, like Spider Silk just recently, and you're really in that ingredient branding topic plus in the original branding, and you're really, really well in a really good network within the performance outdoor industry, I would say, from that perspective, from that side. Then we have Heldsdörfer from Arys, one of our exhibitors here, first time exhibiting at Neonyt. I think, Max, help me out with that. It's a first-time exhibition here. Yeah, and you just flew in from Florence, so you just exhibited at Pitti last week, this week, until this week, is it? Yeah, it's just all in 1 week this year. So good to have you here, and you're like one of those brands really blending performance and fashion into one product. He's wearing it, you can see it, and yeah, it might be one of the best practice examples for what we hope that performance meets fashion could look like actually in the future. Then to his left, we have Yariv Bustan from Twine. You're coloring yarns actually at the production stage.
Yeah, we are digitally dye the yarns and threads in a very sustainable process, no water and very light infrastructure, only electricity connection, and the concept of printer. An office printer. You just need the thread, and you can have any color, any length, whenever you need it.
Then it comes out like magic. Sounds like magic.
No
A couple of years ago, no one would have thought.
Post-treatment. Yeah.
And then presenting today together with me is Max Gilgenmann from Neonyt. You probably all know him. My name is Alex Vogt. I'm from Kern. We work with Messe Frankfurt for 10 years now, and on this conference for 5, I would say. As long as it is. Yeah. Max.
Right, thanks for the lovely introduction. So there's not much to kind of add to that really in the moment, like in terms of where we stand. But I would like to kind of start the whole round here. I mean, we hope we have a really lively discussion between all these different players. We have really the different stages of the industry also here. And let's look into like, how is this developing? When did it start? Kind of that the performance industry on the one hand is getting more interested in the fashion market because maybe there's new opportunities. But on the other hand, the fashion market is becoming way more interested, at least in performance materials, but basically also in the overall outdoor area. So I would love to start with you, Kai, because obviously you are fusing it right now. So like, what was the starting point for you to come up with this brand that is exclusively using performance materials, but basically you are really a fashion brand?
I see it a bit differently.
Okay.
Yes. No. I agree. I agree. Yes, we are a fashion brand, but these days it's blending into each other, like you said in the intro. And I think we found a very good way to bring outdoor function to a degree into the streets of big cities. That is our design, and the amount of function that you really need. In the past, everyone was throwing around topics like, well, we need a water hydrostatic head of 20,000. You don't need that in the city. You need a breathability of 15,000. Those are what I've always heard in the industry, that you need that, but you don't really need that. Yeah, you need a degree of function, and that is, I think we've been doing quite right, that we've got the right amount of function, but the main thing is actually that we are a fashion brand. Yeah, I agree.
So you would consider yourself as being a fashion brand, just to make that super clear. So your field, your playing field is a city. It's not that you can go running with your gear.
No, I wouldn't say you can go running with our gear, but it's for commuting, it's for traveling. So it's all those activities that sometimes if you have to run for a train or a plane, you probably start to sweat. And also if you travel internationally, you've got different climate zones.
So in that hall, I heard you sweat.
All our gear is working, and it's basically moving freely and easily with the same outfit from work to play and from A to B. So that is basically what Arys is all about, that we, for a daily use and with the right amount of function, that obviously derives from the performance industry.
That's
I was going to say something. With all that running and sweating, you'd probably need some odor resistancy finish or antimicrobial finish that they would usually have, like on yoga pants, for example, which is chemistry we're talking about. So performance is chemistry, as we all know.
Absolutely, and I think it's also part of our panel later that we're talking about ingredients and treatments, and we do use odor control treatments on most of our base layer fabrics, and yeah.
I think, I mean, we get into that definitely because we're also going to talk about sustainability, as the panel suggests, obviously. One very interesting part, I think, would always wondered me, if you looked at the auto industry in the last few years, was it a trap that like all these kind of typical outdoor brands went into this, okay, you can use our jackets in like minus I don't know what and on these levels. So like they all pushed always their kind of branding strongly into like this, we are the best performer. And then at some point when they started looking to sustainability, they realized, oh wow, this kind of super functionality is actually super difficult to combine with more sustainability. Do you think, is that a homemade trap, Thomas? Like, how did you perceive this in the last years, that brands in the auto industry went for like, yeah, first functionality branding, and where are they moving now?
Well, thanks for the question. I think we first need to differentiate really between, when we talk about performance, between sports brands, so we talk about Nike and Adidas and Under Armour, which are not really high performance brands in terms of technology, and really the outdoor industry who provides this strong protection and strong performance in their products and also in their materials, because it potentially also is required in life-endangering situations in the core outdoor. That's where they coming from. And I think we have seen this materials moving into fashion already a long time ago. So I think CP Company can probably be named the originator of tech in fashion, then from CP Company becoming Stone Island. And if I'm getting interviewed, I usually say nobody has done technical fashion more consistent, more complete and more perfect than Stone Island in the last 15 or 20 years. And I think the commercial success also shows its results. But an area where this is also influencing, we should not forget, is Japan. Japan was always a a country with high performance materials and a very urban structure. So, and brands like North Face, Goldwyn, Arc'teryx, who have been licensed in Japan, so they were not owned by the original owners. They had more freedom. And we've seen already in Japan 15 and 20 years ago, and today, fantastic, high-tech materials used in a more urban environment, and very successful. And also Uniqlo, if we look at Uniqlo, they have a high credibility when it comes to materials, because Toray, for example, is one of their key suppliers. So I think what you are doing, and in Europe we have not seen so much of that development successfully, but what they all have in common, and what you have in common, is you need to believe in it, and you need to do it long term, and you need to be focused on it, and then those brands will be also successful.
But from your expert perspective on that market and a global perspective, do you think, because Japan and obviously Korea as well, they are planning for quite a long time. So looking at Goldwyn or Snow Peak, they do this for years now. And will that really swap over into European cities or European streets? What do you think, that style? So just from the style perspective.
Yeah, I mean, some people say a trend like athleisure, for example, was a trend and is not a sustainable development. I see, that the brands which are really performance-driven are succeeding. If you look at Arc'teryx, if you look at Patagonia, everybody wants to be like Patagonia, but Patagonia is like Patagonia since 50 years, and it's deeply rooted in all of their activities. They have this discussion, for example, Patagonia, how much performance do we need? They have it maybe the most. How much performance driven by chemical treatments or by chemical materials can we have in our collection to be still accepted in the way our positioning, or we are positioning our brand?
Thomas, I partly disagree with that, because I think athleisure was driven into the common public by newer brands like Lululemon, for example, pushing it more from a not though performance oriented perspective into the market. So I think athleisure is a good topic to say. Well, Lululemon product is built with a sustainable DNA as a core of the brand, and it might be easier to build in a sustainable way than one of those life-saving high mountaineering products that you mentioned before. Let me pass that on to Kutay. Kutay, from your perspective at Bluesign, you work with a couple, not to say most, of the brands mentioned in here.
True.
Yeah,
true.
So how far can those performance, like really high performance, meet sustainability standards in your means from the Bluesign point of view?
Well, I'm the director of fashion brands at Bluesign, and my job is, as the interface between brands and Bluesign, help brands and their manufacturers, fabric makers, to actually use the right chemicals in a more responsible production fashion, so that they're actually minimizing their environmental impact, be it water emissions, air emissions, worker safety, and finally the end product, right? Because nothing disappears. Whatever you put into the production process, and when we're talking about performance is chemistry. That's a fact. So be it athleisure, yoga pants, we talked about odor-resisting finishes. These are these finishes don't disappear; they go into the wastewater and so on and so forth. So everything is chemistry. Going to your question, and Kai also mentioned that. Thanks for taking lead on that. For example, carbon chemistry. We were talking about water resistance, right? I'm going to climb Mount Everest. Do I want a 100% cotton jacket? Probably not. Do I want to get wet and cold up on, at 3,000, 4,000 meters? I don't think so. So what do we do? What's the industry do? They apply different chemicals, toxic chemicals, to give that special performance effect, right? So they're using a lot of very toxic perfluorocarbon chemistry to achieve that water resistance or stain resistance. Same thing. It repels the water and the stain. And currently the C8 or carbonate chemistry is banned around the world because it's very toxic. But C6 chemistry is still being used. Now, there are alternatives, safer alternatives available, okay? And these alternatives are water-based chemicals that are available. So what is the difference? Then let everybody use the water-based chemistry, right? I mean, isn't that simple? That would be a very simple solution. But the difference would be this. If you're using a C6 toxic chemistry to give this water resistancy, that outdoor jacket is, that finish is valid for about 50 washes at home. While when you're using water-based chemistry, which is non-toxic, it's not toxic to the workers, environment, etc., it only lasts maybe 15 washes. So if I were an outdoor brand, I would have taken a stance on this and say, hey guys, my dear consumers, I choose to use water-based chemistry because this is the right thing to do. And you know what? I'm going to educate you as my consumers. You should not take it home and wash it. First of all, this is an outdoor jacket. Maybe you can do some dry cleaning instead of washing it every time you wash it, every time you use it. So I think it's also a lot of using the right chemistry. Yes, you may lose from performance, but it's also about educating the consumers in terms of making that conscious decision to use the right chemicals. And the alternatives, not to cut you off, and the alternatives are available.
So you also touched the sustainability topic, and you put a question mark at the beginning. So I think that sustainability by itself, it's still challenging for brands to charge premium for that. So they need to connect it with some kind of design, and like Moncler, for example, that they are kind of performance, but almost haute couture for a performance. So you need to combine all the time the sustainability with the design and with the fashion. So it's not just one of them. And I also totally agree with you that we need to separate like two industry sectors of let's take Lululemon for running or yoga, and Moncler for more performance or urban fashion brand. So it's we need to take each one of them.
Max, I forgot to answer your question before. I think one aspect on this sustainability discussion with performance is, as Theodor Fontana would say, sein weites Feld. Yeah? Which stance do you take? You know, and I think the performance brands, the core outdoor brands, they are betting very much on durability. And you know, what we see in fashion and fast fashion is a disastrous development on one side, much more consumption, and on the other side, much less use. So every new item which is sold is worn 1 or 2 times when we talk about t-shirts and fashion. So the consumption goes up. Those outdoor brands are not so influenced by style and design and fashion, and that's when you keep a jacket maybe 5, 8, 10 or 20 years, what the people have in their closet, you know, then that's probably the best thing you can do in terms of sustainability, because you have one jacket. You know, if you buy 5 jackets every year with less performance, you know, then is the question, what is more sustainable? So yeah, I think that's where the outdoor brands...
But also here you have a conflict of the brand itself, because you don't... The brand, at the end of the day, don't want you to buy one product every 5 years. So they still want to make you buy more items, so they find kind of a solution of like a capsule edition or special edition, that you will have a luxury, high performance brand, but you will want another one because after a few months there is a new collection or a new capsule and a new designer that they are cooperating with. So there is also all the time conflict between the amount of product that you buy to sustainability, so and between the end user and the brand. So it's a mixture of forces that influencing each other.
Thanks.
This is special made for you, Kai. You just have to make it now.
Absolutely, that's my ball. Yes, we are discussing this quite regularly at Arys. What is making us real sustainable, and it will be eventually to buy less, which is controversy to every growth strategy of a corporation, and buy quality, because we strongly believe that sooner or later out there the consumer will understand that if we're pumping more and more goods into the market and we're struggling with already, we need to create a secondary market where we have outlets popping up here and there just to get the merchandise out there. There's just too much out there. But if you raise that topic with a company that is only looking on return of investment and they want to grow every year by, let's say, 8%, they will probably kill me now. But I think that's the real difficulty that we will have to face as a brand. We want to grow, yes, but we want to grow sustainable, and that is a big part of sustainability, which in addition, fabrics, treatments, and everything else that we can do, we need to try to control and get less merchandise out there in the market, and of a higher quality, which will last longer, where the people will, at the end, have it in their closets for, 3 years, 5 years, or even, I mean, and you brought the example up with Stone Island, and I think it's a great brand. They've been doing it right from the very beginning. And if you buy a product there, 20 years later, it's still fashionable, and it still works. And I think if we all out there as brands look more into that direction, we will jump a lot faster into a more sustainable production in the future.
Kutay, maybe from your experience, the end user or the customers, their willingness to pay is for the sustainability, let's say, call it a message, or for the design, or
that's a tricky question, because now you have to again split the markets. So the performance market is probably always just for performance. In the fashion, there is, I mean, we all want to look good, and therefore they will buy for the look, but it is an added value, and the more and more, and consumers are getting more and more educated, which is good, and in that sense, they will eventually check your labels and hang tags.
And will pay for it.
They want to know, they want to know where their goods are made, who made their goods, and there's a couple of brands.
I think that brings an interesting topic up, especially with the two of you up here on stage, and you as well, actually, because talking about knowing who produced a product means talking about transparency, and needs to talk about what is in that product. That's an ingredient branding. You are kind of an ingredient branding as well, in a way, I would say. And you're on the way to that as well, I would say, or in a way. So how is this performance market maybe a driver for transparency in your perspective? And could that be a driver for transparency even for the fashion market as a whole?
Absolutely. We have started, or we've worked with a brand called Econyl, which probably a lot of people know also here in the room. They have been really one of the pioneers for recycled nylon in a very transparent process, and started their brand in 2012 when we worked with them, and they have just been voted by Vogue Business as the most iconic sustainable fashion tech brand. You know, Prada made a whole collection of bags with them, producing commercials, or not commercials, actually movies, you know, in a value of millions of euros, with reaching a huge audience, also to help to make the ingredient known. And I think that is a shift which is happening in the fashion industry, to give more space to the ingredients, because the fashion brands, they want the ingredients, and when I worked at Goa 15 years ago, you know, we're working with Prada, they were buying the materials, and they said, but you know, you're not allowed to write it on the jackets. Why do you buy then the material, you know? And so the fashion brands, they want to have more ingredients, they want to explain more how it's made, where it's made, what's inside, what certification is there. But that means also you need to give those ingredients, processes, production methods, dyeing methods more space in your communication as a brand. And I think that is something the fashion industry was always resistant, and I think they need to change if they want to help the consumers to find the right products.
I would like to add something to that. Perfectly said. The outdoor industry has been a driver in the in the approach of sustainability in the textile fashion world. And the good example is Bluesign. Bluesign started out as a project on good chemistry or toxic chemistry. You can look at it from different ways. And it became a company in the year 2000. And one of the push to start the company was the push coming from the outdoor consumers. The guy who is wearing the Patagonia jacket climbing in Everest saying, well, you know what, this is nylon polyester to start with, it's bad already, and I demand to know what is in this fabric. How did you dye it, how did you coat it? I know that this has got special performance attributes. It doesn't come naturally, obviously. There's something in this fabric, right? It really became a company, a service company specializing on textile chemicals after that. So they've been driving the force in the industry. But what I have been seeing as the director of fashion brands, because that I'm pacing them most of the time, is the fact that it's always been about the material itself. So let me switch conventional cotton to organic cotton. Let me not use virgin polyester nylon and use recycled nylon and polyester. Well, that's the first wonderful step in becoming more sustainable as a brand. I don't know if you agree with me or not. That's a necessary step. But the next step is, okay, once you've got this wonderful material, what do you do with it? Because in terms of, for example, cotton, which is not a performance fabric, cotton t-shirt, simple example. That can be 100% organic cotton t-shirt, but once you dye and print on it with toxic chemicals, there's nothing organic left about it, and that goes for any product in the market. So now the brands are like, aha, now I understand. So the materials that I use, raw material, is the first great step. The next thing is, what am I putting into it, and how am I producing it? So yes, I think what I'm seeing is that as the fashion brands are slowly catching up, be it performance brands, like the names that you have mentioned today on the fashion performance side of things, or the other ones, high-end fashion brands, are now understanding the importance of, sorry, I keep talking about chemistry because that's my specialty. Now they're understanding the importance of good chemistry on top of the good materials without losing the performance as much as possible. Yep.
Thomas, this brings up a question in my mind. Is there any ingredient brand that, or any market participant, let's say it like this, in the supply chain that you see that could become an ingredient brand well known to the end consumer that supervises transparency or that makes transparency available to the public, like Ian or something? They are all B2B brands. All these tools available right now are not known to the public. Why not?
Well, you know, when we talk about labels, Bluesign is one of them. You know, there is many labels because it's such a complex topic. You know, Bluesign has a focus on the chemical side. You know, Fairwear has a focus on the human side. Fair trade, GOTS. I mean, we have hundreds. You know, now the government is moving in. We've seen the Grüner Knopf in Germany, green button. You know, I'm not a big fan of a national label in a global supply chain, but I think we will see a process where also these labels are competing with each other. You know, and the consumer, at the end of the day, the relevant set for every decision we are taking as consumers is 2.3. So for every decision we take, we have 2.3 options. You know, with whom do we go on holiday? What brands do we like? So which will be the 2 or 3 labels at the end of the day who will be so relevant that they are all over accepted? And I think at the end of the day, this might be still a regular label. If you look at consumer electronics, you know, where we have a label from A to E with the different colors, you know, triple plus, covering all aspects. You know,
but all these that you are mentioning now, they are not showing me transparency as an end consumer. That's just, I mean, GOTS or whatever. It just shows me, well, this is a GOTS certified product, but I don't know where it comes from. I don't know where it is produced, and GOTS it's not a performance label to begin with. But then even Bluesign is not showing me where this garment is made. There is nothing like this, right?
At the moment, nobody's covering, you know, all aspects of sustainability. Also, because there is not a
there is no standard, and there is many aspects.
No
it wasn't meaning really a standard. I was just talking about making it like transparent, that you can follow the steps of a product.
Yeah, but you need to try and simplify it to the consumers, because not everybody will read the entire story where all the product and all the supply chain is coming from. There is a lot of sub materials, and you know, the buttons and the zippers, and each one of them coming from a different direction. So it will be hard to cover all those aspects, and you need to try and simplify it. And since there is no kind of a standard, it's hard to be very transparent, because, okay, I can say that my fabrics is, let's call it sustainable, but what about other material in the goods? So it's still a process that needs to be done, and I totally agree that outdoor brands are leading this trend. I personally think because the outdoor guys that is using these materials are outdoor, and they understand and care more about the environment and you know, the place that they are hanging out, and it's now penetrating more and more to the urban brands and to the rest of the consumers.
But I think one of the interesting kind of question that lies in there is also, can transparency become a branding? I mean, how important is transparency for the branding already, and where will that move to?
Absolutely, but you know, the big difference between the outdoor industry and the fashion industry is that the outdoor industry also has a strong organization, and they're organizationally pushing for change, and that's why they are so strong. So you have the European Outdoor Group, you have the OIA, you have large institutions where the outdoor brands are members, and the EOG is pushing very much, you know, the whole sustainability topic, while in fashion, the brands are all competing with each other, and they're all looking for their individual solutions. You know, Timberland wants to have his own standard, you know, VF wants to have its own standard, everybody wants to have its own standard, and that makes it not transparent for the consumer, because at the end of the day, what he would like to do is to take two jackets, you know, and say, which of those jackets is better,
more sustainable.
You know, is more sustainable. But they cannot, because one is Bluesign certified and the other one is HIG index and the third one is Timberland internal standard, you know, and then he cannot make a decision. He's probably going to buy a fourth one, you know, so.
From a brand perspective view, I would think it is our responsibility in the future to make sure that we inform our consumer what is in our product and where it comes from, because that will give the transparency. And still, labels, Bluesign, they're all very relevant in that process. And we as a brand, obviously, it's good for us. Ingredient branding is great, yeah. But at the end of the day, it's in our responsibility as a brand to bring transparency to the end consumer. And if we're all going down that route, we should all gain from that.
And at the moment, what would you say? Is it more like you also pushing the transparency to the consumer, or are they more asking you already? Like, where are we at the moment?
I think currently there is, it's not that big that the consumer, well, they're interested and they're well informed. But I think there needs to be more transparency from the brand side. It needs to be driven from the brand side to be really open where our products and our ingredients come from.
I'm a little bit wondering right now, because I thought that this transparency topic is something that brings us back to the performance meets fashion, because I always thought, well, the performance market is the one that is where it is way easier to implement transparency into the supply chain, because what you just said is that the consumer is closer to the product in a way, because he needs that product really, and he needs the performance of the product, and all the fabric suppliers are even maybe known to the end consumers, like Scholle, like Torre, like whatever. So it's easier to show or to prove that transparency could be an add-on to a product in a performance market than in the original fashion market. And now you say, well, obviously not. Because what I see in the fashion market is, in the fashion market, this transparency trend will be led by H&M. They just bought Ian they just invested in Ian like 2 seasons ago. They will go on investing, and then they will blow them up, and then you will meet a point where H&M will be 100% transparent and will show their customers where this T-shirt for €9.99 is made, and then all the fashion brands will stand there and say,
I totally agree. So there is a need to give, you know, some kind of a level. It doesn't matter if it's 10 in sustainability, or 1, or A, B, C, or gold, silver. But if the brand will go and speak directly, let's say, call it like that, with the consumers, then the same consumer that is going to H&M, if he will go 5 minutes later to Zara, he will look for what is the grade in sustainability. So it's what you say actually is that H&M is creating kind of a standard, or initiating kind of a global standard, and it can be maybe in cooperation between different brands, or with companies like Bluesign that will go not just to the brands but also will educate the end user what can be, how you can give a grade for the goods.
But what we see also now, the panel before, is vertical brand collaborations. The issue of sustainability in textiles is so complex that we also now see that more and more even ingredients on the material level are collaborating with each other, in vertical collaborations, because one material company or one service company cannot cover all of those aspects. And all of the people out there have different view angles on sustainability, So, and what is behind that? Leather is a good example, So we have a huge discussion around vegan leathers and alternative leathers and so on. And you can look at the production of leather from a sustainable perspective and make it very, very good and very environmental friendly and so on. But you have the cruelty issue, which will never be solved. So if somebody is vegan, he will not buy leather, no matter how sustainable it has been produced. And that so all of those materials, they have an aspect of, they have an ecosystem in which they work. And I believe that to change consumer behavior, you need standards. We have seen that in other industries. Mobile phones, video systems, until we had VHS, before we had 3-4 standards, didn't take off. Until we had GSM, it didn't take off. So yes, we need a standard, maybe one which gives that guidance across brands. Then people, will be more relying to that. I think the individual brand solutions are not helping the consumers, because they cannot judge, is that shirt from brand A more sustainable than the one from brand B or brand C, if everybody's using either its own or a different mix of available standards. I think it's maybe more regulatory thing at the end of the day, for example, for the European Union.
Well, those regulations are coming, I think. So we will see that very soon. It's pretty dynamic in behind the scenes. Right. But like, to again come back a little bit to like the performance meets fashion aspect, I also still wonder, because as we have been a fashion trade show here for the last few years, and then obviously we represent a whole diverse group of fashion brands, and like kind of it's getting more into the performance sector. But my thought also was always, what can fashion learn from performance, and on the other hand vice versa. But this whole thing of like performance materials, how they have been kind of been developing themselves as brands, but also being more and more conscious about like what goes into the fibers and so on. Do you think this would, for example, help the fashion industry to become more sustainable, because there's a whole different experience with dealing with fibers than before? In the fashion industry at the moment, we don't really have any of these ingredient brands that could help a brand to communicate their sustainability claims, because the brands, they are not the experts. The experts on the sustainability is the supply chain. So that is where the ingredient brands lies. This is where, like, you as a Bluesign, you kind of really go into it. So how can you guys help then the fashion industry to, well, on the one hand become more sustainable, but also communicate it better? Was it too complicated? But I mean, Bluesign, I mean, you're coming from the performance sector, and now you're going into fashion. Is there anything different for you if you as Bluesign go into performance brand, or if you go to fashion brand?
Well, so to Thomas's point, the outdoor brands are more sensitive to it, so they're more proactive in terms of doing the right thing, right? Fashion brands are more, they're now, as I said, just catching up, so they're focusing on the raw materials, and now it's about the chemistry. With regards to a brand, whether it's outdoor or a fashion brand, with regards to chemistry, it doesn't make any difference because you're still using the same kind of, chemicals, most toxic chemicals, whether it's a fashion brand or an outdoor brand. What makes then a brand more sustainable is, someone said there are so many moving parts. There's no such thing as 100% sustainable. What is 100% sustainable, right? There's packaging, there's logistics, there's raw materials, there's chemistry. Which one do you tackle? And what is 100%? What's utmost? So you tackle each one of these pieces as much as you can as a brand. You start from somewhere and you build upon that. And for a brand, sustainability is a journey. It's a continuous improvement journey. You measure yourself, see where you are, benchmark yourself, water usage, chemistry usage, in terms of processes, what am I doing, where am I? Then you say, okay, well, you know what, this is where I am and this is where I'm going to set my goals. I'm going to reduce my water usage by 10%, chemistry by 20%. I'm going to have better chemistry, 30% better chemistry next year. It's whatever those goals are. I'm going to change all of my organic cotton to conventional, or all of my virgin polyester to recycled polyester. So, but one last thing. What makes fashion brands really fashion is also the materials that they use. They're using some very high-end fabrics and expensive fabrics. That could be Italian wool, for example. That's what comes to my mind. That's what sets them apart from in terms of raw materials, sets them apart from the performance maybe, or outdoor brands. And when it comes to, high-end fabrics, then they're, that's a different ballgame. Then you're using 100% polyester, 100% nylon. Did that answer the question?
Kutay. So I think there is still a big challenge for brands in terms of sustainability due to the willingness to pay from the consumers. They will, if it will cost the same price, they will take the more sustainable product. Let's say that they know that it's more sustainable, but once you start to put the price and to charge premium, it's starting to become very, very challenging for brands, and this is why I think that they are moving more to the performance and to use more unique materials, not just with sustainability, to gain some kind of a competitive edge and to gain a reason to charge premium, because now I'm using the outdoor materials. You can use it for the urban environment more sufficient. So they are going more to the performance rather than the performance brand is moving to the fashion.
I think that's one of the biggest dilemmas which we hear all over this show and all over these discussions, So the topic of sustainable fashion is omnipresent through influencers, through media, through the top-notch of society who's talking about it. And on the other side, the brands, the retailers, the material companies says nobody wants to pay more for it. Right? So the additional efforts are not getting rewarded at the moment, but it is a process. I think on one of the panels before, they talked about food. When we think about the first bio-Gemüse shops in Germany in the late 60s, it was a dogmatic, political left. You went into it, you had to sign some petitions and sign up for drumming classes or whatever to buy an apple, And now we have Whole Foods as a chain in America bought by Amazon, and we have Basic in Munich and in southern Germany with attractive stores with biofood. But guess what? It was 50 years, the process. Now we have huge environmental challenge on sustainable fashion, but still it takes time. How many more exhibitors do you have this year than last year? You do have significant.
Yeah, we do.
Right? We see more brands, more styles. We see also better fashion than
we do.
But sorry, I know what your
takes time.
What your goal is, but you just mentioned every priest earlier than that, and it's ein ach so weites Feld. You said so, and we're just coming from A to Z. But Max, I'm afraid we're running out of time, because if we want to open up to the public for at least one or two questions, and we have another panel to come, so I think we have to make it full circle. But I think there's one interesting thing that I learned is that performance obviously already met fashion in a way. It met it on the supply chain, or in the supply chain, and at the same time it's still a long way to go, because Kutay, when you just mentioned wool, there is, again, it's a way too wide field, because it just bring up the topic that we discussed before we came up to stage, Tomas, with the blending of fibers, because wool is now coming into the high-end performance fashion as a blended fiber, and that makes then wool blended with polyester. I don't think that this is like super easy to make sustainable in a way. And then the last aspect you said, and that could be a closing question to you, Kutay, while I go down and hand over the microphone, is you said and you said it before, Kai, as well, that there's an over-distribution, or there is way too much stuff in the market, obviously. Kutay, we Western societies, and this was on the discussion on stage before as well, produced a global economic system where we brought societies and producing countries into a position where they can only lever themselves, or where they can only exist while producing for our consumers market here in the Western Hemisphere. So is producing less and saying, well, we have an overproduction process here, is producing less for you as a global acting consultancy, could that be really on a macro perspective a goal to produce less, or are we responsible for all those communities that we chained to us in a way as a society? And is producing less really more sustainable on a global perspective, or do we have to produce more sustainable?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, the reality is that, and this is one of our topics right now, the circular economy, which we haven't really talked about, the whole notion of circular fashion or circular economy, the take, make, dispose, linear economy, changing that to circular, right? So I think it can be done both. We can produce less seasons. I think Burberry also started that a couple of years ago with Christopher Bailey saying, I'm gonna have less seasons instead of, why do we even have resort? Right? I mean, if you think about it, I have fall, winter, spring, summer, that's it, nothing in between. It can be done. But the other thing is that's reduce, reuse, recycle. So not only can you make money from producing less out into the market, but you can have other channels to actually bring that revenue back. For example, Patagonia has got this platform called Wornwear. It's a separate platform from Patagonia.com where you can buy second-hand Patagonia goods. Not only that, on top of that, they also have got this new initiative. Thank you. On this new initiative where they collect Patagonia jackets or items that cannot be repaired anymore, and they cut and sew up, they upcycle them. They take two arms from this jacket, body from the other jacket, boom, it's beautiful. So it can be done. You can always bring out different channels of revenue based on reduce, reuse, recycle, and I think that's where the economy is going towards. And somebody said governments are now stepping in a lot more, and I think more than the consumers, because based on the global fashion agendas, the Pulse of the Fashion Report, only 7% of the global consumers have sustainability in mind when you go to the store to buy something, and that I think 7% is not enough to sway the economy into the right direction. So I think we'll see more and more governments stepping into it. So the answer is yes. both is possible. Sorry, I just kept talking. But it's a long topic. We can talk for hours, literally. So
I think time-wise, we can have like 1 or 2 questions still, but we need to be quick. So maybe Kutay, you're not going to answer the last.
Maybe you can introduce. Maybe you can introduce yourself first, and then.
No, that's right.
Hello, my name is Sonja from Hof. I'm a member of a startup working together with a sustainable designer. And from our perspective, I want to ask whoever feels called to answer, what opportunities do you see? I hear a lot about collaboration. I hear about vertical integration and cooperation between brands and supply chain. For new brands who are into design, how can they step onto the wagon and maybe collaborate? How can we bring also design into sustainable fashion? Because we notice here there's a lot of design missing, actually.
So I think that we need to involve the technology as well. Sorry for taking this example, because this is what me and my colleagues are doing. We are developed a very sustainable technology for digitally dye the yarns and threads. So the very basic material that you will use will be very sustainable. There is also options for unique designs and unique colors that cannot be created in any other technology, like a color gradient, a thread that is starting from, let's say, dark blue to light blue, or any other combination. So it's a combination between sustainability and design. And I think that especially for small brands, they need to go to the core and to the technology, and because it will be challenging for them to cooperate with big brands, at least at the beginning. Technology is one of the key aspects.
Kai, I guess in that sense also, like, ingredient brands would be interesting, because if you have innovative fibers, they need to be tested. You can't do that on big scales. You need smaller scales, and you need great designers to show what you can do with them.
Absolutely. If I would quote our friend Cyril Gutsch, who had said, eco-design is the future. We are not, at the moment, we are recycling products, not only in fashion, we are recycling products which were not designed to be recycled. And that's why it's so complicated, so expensive, and so on. So obviously the designers play a key role. And if you look at the role of Parsons Design School, for example, how much they are doing and helping, to redesign products that are better to be recycled. And you will see a lot here also on the show, footwear, which you can take apart yourself. And one of the key things where the designers need to help is getting back to monomaterials. The whole industry was pushed both from the end user and from the brands to multi-materials, to blended materials, because blended materials give higher performance. But blended materials are difficult to recycle. If we look at a topic like wipes, wipes is a huge environmental issue and cannot be solved because of multi-materials. So that's where designers can help. And I believe when I look at Econyl, now they work with Prada, but 2012, when they started, they and still today they collaborate a lot with small labels, who have a vision, and I believe for startups and for brands, it's really try to get to the material companies and work with them.
Kai, you're the creative on stage, so is your...
Come and talk to us.
Okay, well, I see a time to end slide here on well, I think this is you can go to Arys and talk to them and see if design is missing to the market. I think we have to close a gap between performance and fashion on the distribution side, maybe, but not in how it is produced. Max, what would you say?
I think actually performance can help fashion a lot to become more sustainable, and I'm excited to see how these two parts coming together. So, and I'm very happy that we have already people working on that and bringing it forward.
So, thank you for being up here on stage.
Thank you.
Thank you to the audience as well.